is this version of Better Devils, the bestest devils of them all. Today, guys, we are going to be reviewing one of the weapons that defined year one of Destiny 2. From the beta to vanilla, to even getting the random roll version of it back in Forsaken, Better Devils was iconic amongst legendary hand cannons. Today, though, it is returned to us not only as a 140 round per minute hand cannon, but also as a Strand hand cannon, as opposed to its original kinetic form. And even though this weapon probably was more designed for PvP, at least initially in the beginning of Destiny 2, it's got some potency inside of PvE. Now, before we dive into the different roles that you can get on Better Devils, let me just say one thing first. This is a crucible drop. On top of that, one of the best things you could do if you're farming for this weapon is resetting your rank in crucible. By doing so, this will unlock multiple traits per column, which is why my Better Devils here has multiple traits per column. What's so beautiful too is that you can actually enhance these traits, which means just like your shiny rolls, all the traits in columns 3 and column 4 will be enhanced when going through the upgrade process for these weapons. With that being said though, let's talk stats. First up at base, we have 40 range on Better Devils, 42 stability, 40 handling, 40 reload, 75 aim assist, our normal zoom of 14, and an AE stats of 10. Now, if you compare these stats across the board to some other top 140 hand cannons, specifically in that top slot, the stats are pretty bad. Across the board, this is actually the worst statted 140 hand cannon on the list. The only place where it even beats out anything is that it has 4 more range than spare rations and 1 more shot in the mag over judgment. But that's it. Everywhere else though, it loses out, which I gotta say, guys, it's kind of impressive. Like if you're snagging kills inside of Crucible, you can literally say, hey, I'm killing you with literally one of the worst statted hand cannons in the game, which is kind of a flex. Now, with these stats being as poor as they are, this is gonna make the perks on this thing even more important. Now, being a ritual weapon, it gets 12 perks in each column, which is exactly why I said you need to reset your rank in Crucible, guys, because you got a lot of options here. If you were to just get 1 trait per column, it's like bottom dollar all over again. You could say goodbye to ever getting the Godroll. But with multiple traits per column and the ability to focus this weapon with shacks, landing that perfect Godroll might be easier than what you think. Now let's start with the perks in column 3. We have Rapid Hit, Perpetual Motion, Reconstruction, Slice, Pugilist, Demolitionist, Moving Target, Enlightened Action, Air Trigger, Rangefinder, Perfect Float, and Slick Draw. For our 4th column, we have One Fraud, Explosive Payload, Hatchling, Frenzy, Adrenaline Junkie, Swashbuckler, Kill Clip, Zim Moment, Opening Shot, Gut Shot Straight, Elemental Capacitor, and Deconstruct. Now, as mentioned with the 12 perks in each column, there are a lot of options on this thing. But I want to start with my PvE players first. Don't worry, PvP guys, we'll be talking a lot about this in just a moment. But with it being a Strand hand cannon, PvE players, I really want you to consider Better Devils. I know you're probably like, Cross, I've got kept confidence. Why would I need this thing? Hear me out. There are some fantastic traits here for PvE. Things like Slice, Pugilist, Demolitionist, Enlightened Action. These are all very, very solid perks. Now, Enlightened Action is a no-brainer. The perk reads that dealing damage improves reload speed and handling, and each weapon hit is going to grant a stack of Enlightened Action, which grants us increased handling and increased reload speed, stacking out to a max of 12. Now, this works differently depending on the weapon that you're using, which on a hand cannon, a single hit counts as 3 stacks, meaning you can reach max stacks in just 4 hits. Now, at 3 stacks, this gives you 12 handling and 12 reload. 6 stacks is 25 handling and 25 reload. 9 stacks is 38 handling and 38 reload. And at 12 stacks, that maxes out at 50 handling and 50 reload. Now, this is a really nice bump to our stats. And considering the stats on Better Devils is already so poor at base, Enlightened Action here really helps, with the enhanced version increasing the benefits at max stacks by +5, capping out at 55 handling and 55 reload speed. It's a solid perk, guys, and one that you can appreciate in both PvE and inside of PvP. Next, I want to talk about Slice. This is a Strand specific perk. It reads that casting your class ability allows this weapon to sever targets on hit for a brief duration, up to a maximum number of targets. So upon using your class ability, your next 5 hits within 8 seconds will allow you to apply Sever. Now, Sever is an incredibly powerful Strand ability. As targets affected by Sever have their outgoing damage reduced by a whopping 40% in PvE. It's also pretty nice outside of PvP, as it's a 15% reduction there. Now, it's especially powerful on a primary weapon. There's no issue of ammo economy, as you have unlimited ammo. It's easy to proc, easy to spread that debuff, And you've got the enhanced version, which increases that timer from 8 seconds to apply Sever to 9 seconds. It's a good perk, guys, and a lot of synergy there within Strand itself. Lastly, for our column though, we can't overlook Demolitionist and Pugilist. Demo is going to give back 10% grenade ability energy per kill. Also, activating your grenade reloads the weapon. Pugilist gives us back 10% melee ability energy per kill, and dealing melee damage gives us 35 handling, which lasts for 3 seconds. Now, the enhanced version of these perks simply kicks up those percentages from 10% to 11% ability energy back per kill. But either way, guys, these are very good perks. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, Cross, what about air trigger? Listen, like I've said before in the past, air trigger is really good. Like, we're talking outlaw level reload speeds, but it does require you to be in the air. If you can get used to that playstyle, the reload speed is very, very fast. You just got to remember to bunny hop as you're hitting the reload so that you're getting those benefits. Now, with those traits in column 3 out of the way, what are the best perks to pair with it in column 4? Well, first, you have perks that just increase our damage. One for All is a really easy one to proc here. We're hitting 3 separate targets, increases damage for a moderate duration. This is going to grant us a 35% increase in damage for 10 seconds, after of course scoring hits against 3 enemies within 3 seconds of each other. It's a very easy perk to activate in PvE, guys. You can pretty much be walking around at all times with a 35% buff if you have enough enemies in front of you, and that buff duration lasting for 10 seconds at base, 11 seconds when it's enhanced. The other perk that's really good is Explosive Payload. The beautiful thing about Explosive Payload inside of PvE is that it outright increases our damage to all targets, no proccing necessary. You see, the splitting of our damage there with the explosive portion dealing more damage equates to about 15% more damage in our body shots and 10% more damage in our crits, with the enhanced version giving us +5 reload. It's a great perk, guys. However, here recently, when it comes to perks that have Explosive Payload, I tend to lean toward weapons like Midnight Coup, as I'm able to double stack perks alongside Explosive Payload. For instance, Kinetic Tremors, Frenzy. We're talking solid damage perks alongside the buff that Explosive Payload is granting. The other damage perk that's also here is, of course, Frenzy. Where being in combat for an extended time increases damage, handling, and reload for this weapon until you are out of combat. Simply by sitting in combat for 12 seconds, you're able to grant yourself a 15% increase in damage, as well as 10 handling and 100 reload speed, which lasts for 7.2 seconds. Now, the damage bonus is not as high as, say, something like One for All, but you are getting max handling, as well as max reload speed, which really helps the low base stats present on better devils. What this also means is that in that third column, you don't really need perks like Inline Action or even Rapid Hits. This is when you can start pairing things like Slice, Pugilist, Demolitionist, whatever you want, alongside Frenzy, and Frenzy by itself will pick up those other stats. Now, the last perk to look at is Hatchling. Precision Final Blows or rapidly defeating targets with this weapon spawns a Threadling at the target's location. Now, this is going to spawn a Threadling either from a single precision kill or every 3 rapid non-precision kills. Here's the thing about using a weapon with Hatchling. In my opinion, you don't want to use Hatchling unless you're really dedicating yourself to Strand. When it comes to fragments like Thread of Evolution, which buffs that Threadling damage, Thread of Rebirth, which allows you to double stack and create 2 Threadlings within a single kill, you can start to see the overwhelming benefits here of using Hatchling, especially on better devils. However, on our other classes, not so much. It's a great perk, but one I only really commit to if I'm singling out Strand on its own. Now, there are also other perks that are present here. For instance, Swashbuckler, Adrenaline Junkie, if you wanted to do that Pugilist demo combo and directly synergize within your neutral game abilities. Kill Clip is also present. Deconstruct is also here, which is really interesting for sustained damage, and also grants bonus damage against vehicles and constructs and refunds ammunition. You'd be surprised when Deconstruct actually procs. Granted, on a primary weapon, it's not that big of a deal. And for weapons like Tusk of the Boar, like I was using Deconstruct all the time, but then Bungie nerfed it. So I definitely don't use it as much as I did. But if you wanted to go the route of like Reconstruction and Deconstruct and have a combo there that literally allows you to just lay on the trigger, that's a combo you can utilize. But keep in mind, Deconstruct does not work while the magazine is overflowed from Reconstruction. But of course, it will work within its base magazine. But again, for me, guys, Deconstruct, I prefer it on specials and heavies, and I definitely preferred it before it got nerfed. Now, before we tie up our god rolls for Better Devils, we do need to go over its origin traits. This is something completely new on Better Devils. We have one quiet moment, which grants increased reload speed and handling when out of combat. Swords gain faster movement speed. Not really an origin trait that I enjoy, as it doesn't really apply while you're in combat. On our other trait, though, we have Nadir Focus. This is a very, very good one. Sustained fire increases accuracy and range. Not really an origin trait for my PvE players, which is why most people are probably going to go the route of One Quiet Moment in PvE, but for PvP, Nadir Focus is very good. I love it on weapons like Unending Tempest. You pair that with Dynamic Sway as well. You're like doubling up on the accuracy with one boosting range. Again, Better Devils suffers in the stats department, but it's origin traits like Nadir Focus that really picks it up. Now, what is the Godroll for PvE? I think if you're going Strand and you're still committing to Strand, Hatchling is very, very good. And you could do Hatchling, Pugilist, and Demolitionist, either one of those, just something there to boost that ability regeneration. You could also go Slice and Hatchling together and just go full-blown Strand synergy. You've got Threadlings, you've got Severing, all kinds of options here for synergizing with Strand. Now, the reload speed was something that I thought was going to hinder me a lot more, considering its base stats being worse, but it really wasn't that bad. I felt like with the reload masterwork, you can work around it. And you can also utilize mag perks like Flared Mag Will, Tactical Mag, things like that to help mitigate that issue. If you can't stand it though, Enlightened Action is a good pairing. If not that, then Air Trigger, as long as you can remember to jump. Now for damage perks, I do think Frenzy and Explosive Payload are very good options. And you can take the route of Slice and Explosive Payload or even Frenzy to still have good damage, but also Strand synergy. Now the reason why I really like Better Devils this season, or this episode, is really because of our artifact mods. First up, it's a hand cannon, so we could take advantage of overload hand cannons, thus overcharging our Better Devils here. But my favorite mod this season is actually Threaded Blast, which reads that destroying a tangle with a Strand weapon creates a larger and more damaging explosion. Now I love this artifact mod, both for PvE and for PvP. You see, a tangle, guys, is really easy to create, but you can also create it literally with Slice. Because of that sever effect going in place, you can pretty much self-proc those tangles. Granted, you do have cooldowns, but literally just popping your class ability, now your weapon can apply sever and does create a tangle. Now, when you shoot that tangle, that explosion does 18,528 damage. However, with Threaded Blast, it's still doing 18,528 damage, but it also tags on 2 more instances of damage, around 15k each. So almost tripling your damage here, guys, which is substantial. On top of kicking up the radius to 12 meters. This is a very, very strong artifact mod. People need to be using this artifact mod way more. Even inside of PvP, you can literally shoot a Strand tangle inside of PvP and get one-hit kills. I do it all the time. And with Better Devils being a Strand weapon, literally just popping a shot in it, boom, you've got a mini tangle nuke ready to go. Now, if you've watched the explosions from Threaded Blast inside of PvE, you may have noticed sometimes it's like 12,000 in those 2 instances of damage, maybe 13,000. I don't know if it's because it's like right outside of the ranges or if there's some like inconsistencies there. It does seem like 15,000 was the highest damage value that I've seen here in those 2 instances, but regardless, it's a hefty amount of extra damage. This is a very solid PV hand cannon, guys, and there's a reason why I've run Slice on so many of my other Strand weapons, from Aisha's Care to Breach Light, Imminence. However, none of those weapons are hand cannons. Better Devils is, and it has the ability to self-proc and create its own tangles. And with artifact mods like Threaded Blast, that makes it incredibly valuable. Now, how do I feel about Better Devils inside of PvP? Oh boy. Let me just say this. There are some people that absolutely love Better Devils inside of PvP, and despite its lack of stats, they religiously use it. And there are times I go up against folks using Better Devils that are popping off, man. I'm like, man, they are landing 3 taps with ease. However, if you ask me, Cross, you gotta win this 1v1 or we're gonna delete your vaults. Which hand cannon are you bringing? Fellas, it's not gonna be Better Devils. Even with Hammer Forge, Accurized Round, Ranged Masterwork, you're only reaching 33.45 meters, which pretty much means every other hand cannon is outranging it, outside of Midnight Coup, which shares the same range stats. But Midnight Coup has other higher stats that make up for that lack of range. And personally, if I had to choose like which hand cannon I would use in a 1v1 if my life depended on it, it would probably be the Zen Moment Explosive Payload Midnight Coup. Like, this is my role. This is the one I love. I use this thing all the time, and if not that, probably my Rose. I mean, my Rose with Explosive and Slide Shot is really, really good. And what I love about the Slide Shot role is I'm able to stay in the gunfight within a single slide, allowing me to continue snowballing with my teammates. Now, what Better Devils does possess is that it does possess Nadir Focus, which is a great origin trait. And we tested it out. At maximum benefits, it will give you about 1 extra meter of range, which is pretty nice, guys. And you also get the accuracy buffs. So what I'm trying to say here is that even though Better Devils may not be my favorite hand cannon, I do think it is still a good PvP hand cannon. I prefer Rose, I prefer Midnight Coup, I prefer actually a lot of other hand cannons, including my Palindrome that you all deleted. But Better Devils is not a bad option. And if I had to choose the PvP Godroll, I would probably go the route of like rapid hits or moving targets with either Zim Moment, Kill Clip, or Explosive Payload. Combine that with accurized rounds, Hammerforged Rifling, ranged masterwork, essentially just kicking up the range as high as it can go, which is about 33.45 meters here. With Nadir Focus, you've got a pretty solid weapon, guys. What I will say is that if you are going to go rapid hits, I wouldn't do rapid hits in Zim Moments. Maybe rapid hit Kill Clip, rapid hit Explosive Payload. But if you're going to go Zim Moments, maybe Zim Moment moving targets. You've got moving target that's giving you that plus 10 aim assist when aiming down sights. You've got Zim Moment, which really locks everything down. By no means do I believe you need to have rapid hits and Zim Moment. I think that's kind of overkill, but completely up to you. Now, should you go the route of Slice inside of PvP? We talked about it inside of PvE. Inside of PvP, it's a 15% decrease in outgoing damage on your opponents. But here's the thing. It turns out Sever is not even working inside of PvP. We went and tested this with a few weapons, and they were all still doing the same amount of damage. We even found a post on Bungie's help forums that Sever has not been working since around April. So Bungie, please fix this. I would love to recommend Slice, but only when it gets fixed. Outside of that, Opening Shot is also present on this weapon, which actually has some pretty good pairing with Nadir Focus. Opening Shot is going to boost the range and accuracy of that first shot. We're talking that first shot having a range of 36.82 meters with that Hammerforged accurized round roll. And if you use weapons with Opening Shot, you feel it. It snacks. But then you've gotten into Focus, which will start to kick in, boosting that accuracy, helping with that range. So despite these perks not stacking on each other, they're helping the weapon out in two different areas, both in the beginning of the gunfight and throughout. With Better Devils inside of PvP, you're looking at a 0.87 time to kill value, just like our other 140s. Keep in mind, Explosive Payload does diminish our damage a bit, which means damage fall off is a bit more severe. You'll still get the 3-tap, but the moment you reach damage fall off, you'll get to a point where you have to land 4 shots. Something to keep in mind when choosing your role. What I will say for the folks that use Better Devils inside of PvP, there is a cult following of folks that do in fact love Better Devils. Hell, even FX, who plays PvP all the time, says that Better Devils is his favorite hand cannon in all of Crucible. So if you like it, guys, go right ahead. It's not my first choice. It's not even my second choice. But there have been times I've used Better Devils and thought, yeah, I see why people like this thing. Well, guys, that is our review for the Bestest Devils 2024. I'm happy to see it back, and even more happy to see that Bungie has made it a Strand weapon. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.